March 23, 1945, the Rhine River near Wesel, Germany. British infantry crouch inside a steel box on wheels as German machine gun fire sparks off the armor plating. The vehicle rolls down the muddy riverbank and splashes into the Rhine without hesitation. Water rises around the hull as the propeller engages. Inside, soldiers grip their rifles, grateful for the armor between them and the bullets snapping overhead. The vehicle wallows through the current, armor deflecting fire that would have shredded the canvas-topped American DUKWs. 20 minutes later, the Terrapin climbs the opposite bank, disgorges its infantry cargo, and turns back for another load. This ungainly 8-wheeled steel turtle has just proven its worth. When crossing a river under fire, armor matters more than speed. What those British soldiers rode was the Terrapin Mark I, Britain's armored answer to amphibious river crossings in contested zones. Between 1944 and 1945, approximately 600 Terrapins were built. They participated in every major river crossing in Northwest Europe: the Scheldt, the Rhine, the Elbe. The vehicle was slow on water, awkward on land, and looked like a bathtub welded to a truck chassis. But it delivered soldiers and supplies across rivers while under fire, something the faster, more numerous American DUKW simply couldn't do. When German defenders turned rivers into killing zones, the Terrapin's armor transformed theoretical crossings into accomplished facts. The problem facing British forces in 1943 was recognizing that Northwest Europe's reconquest would require crossing countless rivers, canals, and water obstacles under fire. The American DUKW amphibious truck was revolutionary, transforming logistics by swimming ashore with supplies. But the DUKW was unarmored, designed for administrative crossings where opposition was minimal or non-existent. What British planners anticipated was different: contested crossings where German defenders would pour fire onto boats, rafts, and amphibious vehicles attempting the crossing. In those circumstances, thin canvas and hope weren't adequate protection. The strategic context was Europe's geography. From Normandy to Berlin, Allied forces would encounter the Seine, Somme, Scheldt, Maas, Rhine, Weser, and Elbe rivers, plus countless smaller waterways. German strategy emphasized river defenses, fortifying natural obstacles with mines, wire, bunkers, and artillery. Crossing these barriers would require amphibious vehicles operating under direct fire. Existing solutions were inadequate for this specific threat. Assault boats were small, slow, and offered zero protection. The DUKW was excellent for logistics, but suicide for assault crossings. Landing craft were too large for narrow rivers. What British forces needed was something between assault boats and landing craft: armored protection, reasonable capacity, and ability to carry troops or supplies across contested water obstacles. The designer was Thornycroft, a British engineering firm with experience in specialized vehicle design. The design team worked to specifications from British Army engineers who understood river crossing requirements from North Africa and Italy campaigns. The development brief emphasized armor over speed, recognizing that surviving enemy fire mattered more than crossing quickly. The vehicle was designated Terrapin after the turtle, appropriate given its appearance and amphibious nature. Development proceeded through 1943 with prototypes tested in British waters and simulated combat conditions. The design used an 8-wheeled chassis, providing stability in water and traction on muddy banks. The hull was steel armor, box-like for maximum internal volume and simple construction. The engine was Ford V8, underpowered but reliable and available. The propulsion system used wheels on land and a single propeller in water. Simplicity prioritized over sophisticated marine engineering. The physical design reflected pragmatic choices. Overall length was 22 feet. Width was 8.5 feet. Height was 7.5 feet to top of hull. The armor was 10mm steel, adequate against rifle fire and shell fragments, but vulnerable to anti-tank weapons. This reflected the understanding that Terrapins would face small arms, not dedicated anti-armor weapons. The weight was 11 tons fully loaded, heavy but manageable for the 8-wheel configuration. The cargo capacity was 25 troops with equipment, or approximately 5 tons of supplies. The hull interior was basic. Bench seats along the sides for infantry or open cargo space for ammunition, fuel, or supplies. Access was through rear doors opening to allow rapid loading and unloading. The crew was minimal, driver and commander, both protected by the armored hull. Vision ports provided limited visibility, a compromise between protection and situational awareness. Amphibious performance was unimpressive by modern standards, but adequate for the mission. Water speed reached approximately 4 miles per hour, painfully slow compared to DUKW's 6 miles per hour or later amphibious vehicles. But the armor meant Terrapins could survive the crossing where faster vehicles couldn't. Land speed was roughly 15 miles per hour maximum, the heavy hull and underpowered engine limiting mobility. Range was approximately 100 miles on roads, less cross-country. The 8-wheel configuration provided excellent obstacle crossing and stability in water. All 8 wheels were driven, distributing weight and providing traction in mud. The long wheelbase and multiple wheels meant the vehicle could bridge small ditches and obstacles that would stop shorter vehicles. In water, the 8 wheels provided additional propulsion supplementing the propeller, useful when entering or exiting water across muddy banks. Production began in 1944 at Thornycroft's facilities. Approximately 600 Terrapins were manufactured before war's end, far fewer than the 21,000 DUKWs produced. The limited production reflected the Terrapin's specialized role. DUKWs handled administrative crossings and logistics. Terrapins handled contested assault crossings where armor was essential. Different tools for different missions. First major combat use came during the Scheldt operations in October to November 1944. Canadian and British forces attacking German positions in flooded Dutch lowlands required amphibious vehicles for operations across dikes, canals, and flooded fields. Terrapins carried assault troops across contested water obstacles under fire, their armor protecting soldiers from German defensive fire that devastated unarmored boats. The operations were brutal, casualties heavy, but Terrapins delivered troops where they needed to go despite opposition. The Rhine crossing on March the 23rd to 24th, 1945, was the Terrapins' defining moment. Operation Plunder involved massive amphibious assault across the Rhine's final barrier to Germany's heart. British forces used Terrapins extensively alongside conventional assault boats and rafts. While DUKWs ferried supplies across once bridgeheads were secured, Terrapins participated in initial assault waves, carrying infantry under fire. German defenders poured artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire onto crossing sites. Terrapins absorbed hits that would have sunk assault boats or destroyed DUKWs. One account from a British infantry sergeant describes riding a Terrapin across the Rhine. Jerry was throwing everything at us. Shells landing in the water, machine guns hosing the river. We were packed in this steel box. Couldn't see anything. Just hearing impacts against the armor. Felt like being inside a bell someone was hammering, but we made it across. Half the assault boats in our wave were hit, men screaming in the water. The Terrapin took hits and kept going. When those rear doors opened on the far bank, we piled out and took cover. That ugly bastard saved our lives. For comparison, the American DUKW was faster, more numerous, and more versatile for logistics. But it was unarmored, making it unsuitable for contested crossings. The DUKW revolutionized amphibious logistics but couldn't deliver troops into fire. The German Landwasserschlepper was a tracked amphibious vehicle with better cross-country mobility, but fewer were produced and saw limited service. The Soviet forces used various makeshift amphibious vehicles, but nothing matching the Terrapin's combination of armor and capacity for its specific role. The Terrapin uniquely combined armored protection for contested crossings, sufficient capacity for useful troop or cargo loads, and adequate water performance for European rivers. No other Allied amphibious vehicle provided armor while maintaining reasonable capacity. That specialized capability justified production despite limited numbers, but soldiers and crews identified significant limitations. The slow water speed meant extended exposure during crossings. A 200-yard river crossing might take 10 to 15 minutes, a long time under fire. The limited visibility from inside the armored hull meant crews and passengers were essentially blind during crossings, trusting the driver to navigate correctly. The underpowered engine struggled with muddy banks, sometimes requiring assistance to exit water onto slippery slopes. The 10mm armor stopped bullets, but offered no protection against direct artillery hits or anti-tank weapons. Maintenance was challenging with the unusual 8-wheel drive system requiring attention to multiple differentials and drive components. The propeller and marine systems needed maintenance by personnel more familiar with land vehicles than boats. The Ford V8 engine, while reliable, was barely adequate for the 11-ton weight, resulting in frequent mechanical stress. One veteran driver recalled, "The Terrapin was slow, blind, and barely powerful enough to move itself, but it kept infantry alive during crossings where nothing else would have worked. You couldn't ask soldiers to cross rivers in unarmored boats when Germans were shooting. The Terrapin gave them a chance." Post-war service was minimal. As river crossings in Europe ended, the Terrapin's specialized role disappeared. The vehicles were largely scrapped by 1946 to 1947. No export users adopted Terrapins as the DUKW's superior logistics capability made it more desirable for post-war militaries. Surviving examples are extremely rare. Perhaps half a dozen Terrapins exist in museums, including the Tank Museum Bovington and Imperial War Museum. The vehicle's obscurity reflects its specialized nature and limited production. The legacy influenced post-war amphibious vehicle development. The recognition that armored amphibious vehicles served different roles than unarmored logistics vehicles continued in vehicles like the LVT-P5 and modern AAV-7. The principle the Terrapin established, that contested amphibious crossings require armor, remains valid in modern military doctrine. March 23, 1945, the Rhine. The Terrapin climbs the eastern bank, armor scarred by bullet impacts but intact. German fire slackens as British infantry establish positions. The ungainly 8-wheeled turtle turns back toward the western bank for another load. The Terrapin proved that sometimes the right tool isn't the fastest or most elegant, but the one that completes the mission. River crossings under fire required armor. The Terrapin provided it. Not glamorous, not numerous, not famous, but present at every major British river crossing in northwest Europe, delivering soldiers across contested water when nothing else would suffice. The 8-wheeled amphibious